Well guys, it is finally time to give old Sonic my 24 F150 regular cab short bed 5-liter 4-wheel drive the power upgrades that it has been missing. If you see my last videos, suspension and whatnot, we obviously finally have it looking pretty, but you know, something's just been missing. I feel like a truck like this, you just can't be rolling around with a cold air intake and exhaust only. I mean, come on now. So finally, I've had the chance to take a couple days off from work, schedule it out so I can get this Daylight twin turbo kit installed. I've had this kit for a while now. It's just been busy. Haven't had a chance to get to it. And also I did just want to schedule out enough time to be able to do an install for you guys. So I'm going to walk you along, watch everything that I do, the way I want to route things, issues that I might run into, extra parts that I had to get aside from the kit itself, because there are some things that can be added and just improved upon a little bit, and I was already aware of that ahead of time. So yeah, it should be pretty sweet. First things first here, I got to get truck racked up, tires, wheel wells out, grill, bumper, because the first thing I'm going to do is just starting to get prepped. We got to get the valve covers pulled so we can pull the timing cover and get our turbocharger oil drain fittings onto that timing cover, get everything put back together there, and then we will start the next process. But first things first, let's get some jazz out of our way. Alrighty, got some stuff out of the way, racked up, tires yanked, fender liners out here. We've got a grill off. I already went ahead, you can see ground's a bit wet from squeegeeing. I already pulled lower hose. That's honestly seems to be the best way to just get rid of, turn the light on here. Best way to get rid of some coolant is pull the lower hose. I pulled it out the oil cooler too, off radiator. Drain what you can into a pail, and then there's gonna be some splatters, you know, just kind of squeegee. I wouldn't get too crazy with cleaning right now, just because once you pull the thermostat housing and the water pump, it's gonna get a whole lot more messy. So like I said, I won't get too crazy about cleaning right now, but starting to remove some stuff up top. Got to get intake out of the way, coolant reservoir, battery, some random hoses and stuff to get us down to where we can pull that pump. Alrighty guys, once you get the water pump and thermostat housing off the front of the engine, that will be pretty much the last of the coolant mess. So at that time, that's why I leave the valve covers on too, so far, because at this time it's a good time to rinse everything down with water. I just use a hose real lightly and just kind of rinse everything off. That will get rid of all your coolant mess. I use my fluid little extraction tool to pull out the rest of the coolant in the radiator, heater core, oil cooler, things like that, just so it isn't dripping coolant anymore at all through the process, and that'll just make it a lot cleaner for the rest of the job, now that you really don't have to deal with any sort of coolant mess. I do suck a little bit of coolant out of the block too, that way it doesn't drip if you're moving the truck up and down on the hoist. So just be careful, because obviously we got a lot of connectors pulled off, so you obviously don't want to get everything soaking wet. We got fuel lines disconnected, so you really just want to be easy with it. Get all the coolant rinsed off your undercarriage. That way you do not have to deal with a mess for the rest of the job. So now pulling off front end accessories. Alternator, we just got to pop loose. AC compressor just has to be pop loose to the timing cover. Pull off a couple idler pulleys. Harmonic balancer's got to be yanked, and then we'll get to pulling valve covers. Pretty straightforward on the valve covers. Passenger side is a little goofy since you have the high pressure pump for the high pressure fuel system, and then that high pressure line is going to be a little bit of a bear to snake out from behind the cylinder head that goes to the high pressure rail, but pop that out and then that cover should come right off. So we'll get to that. Alright, as you can see, we've got valve covers and timing cover off. We've got our accessories just popped off to the side there. AC compressor, alternator, no need to pull them all the way or even disconnect anything on them. Just pop them out of the way of that cover so it can be pulled out easy enough. I'd say probably the toughest part of that whole thing, really, which, you know, it isn't really that tough, it's just tedious and you kind of got to have some, you know, your hands got to fit in there, but the high pressure fuel line going to the rail, it kind of sits up on the valve cover like so, and it's got a couple of these connector or line clips here, and it goes up at kind of a goofy angle, so just getting your hand back behind the cylinder head there is a little bit tight, but and like I said, it's got this cover. There's a harness going, clips on it, but that just bolts up to the back of the head, and it kind of covers that line, so you do have to pull it. There's a a line clip that goes here, and then a couple bolts, and she pulls out. Nothing major. Again, like I said, it's not all that hard, it's just kind of time consuming, just taking it easy. But I guess on the plus side here, this engine only has 2,000 miles. This whole truck's only got 2,000 miles, so it was pretty clean. I did pressure wash it the other day before I brought it in the shop here. So that being said, if your truck's got some miles on it or the underhood's pretty dirty, I'd say before you even start this project, I would just give it a good pressure washing. That way you're not risking getting any dirt, grime, grub inside the engine once you do have it split open like this. But now we are on to drilling our holes for the turbo oil drains. So I'll get that taken care of and I will get back at you. Alrighty, turbo drain back ports are in the cover, but I did run into some technical difficulties. Ended up ruining the first set of bungs that are supplied with the kit. And luckily enough, I do have AN fittings laying around. I found some that would work. So redid it. Nonetheless, back in action. And that just kind of goes to show you too, with projects like this, I mean, something's bound to happen. You're bound to run into something. Even here with all the resources, we still run into issues here and there. I mean, it's anything aftermarket, you're gonna run into little issues. So, you know, plan for it, or, you know, at least plan enough time to have the truck down for maybe an extra day or two than you're thinking. But anyways, cover is now ready. And the block is prepped to put the cover back on. Biggest thing is going to be your RTV, you know, in the corners, your different mating surfaces. Like here you can see is a mating surface. Here's another surface. Same thing on the other side here, here, and then also the inside of the V for the timing cover here, here, and up top. Basically, a little bit of RTV on those before you put the cover back on, and she'll seal back up nicely. But just make sure they're cleaned good, and then after you get all the old RTV off, take like some brake clean on a microfiber cloth or something and just wipe them. That way there's no residue down there, so the RTV sticks good. But anyways, after you get that cover sealed, basically valve covers back on, slap everything back together. I'm just gonna cut to the next part here once I get covers back on. Guys, covers are on. Some of the accessories are on. I did end up leaving the alternator and the AC compressor off to the sides, because actually once you get down, there's a little bit better access to the manifolds on both sides, or at least you can just see them better, so it'd be a bit easier to get to the studs, especially once the headers go in. Covers are on. Ran the electrical back to the valve covers, all the plugins. I left the coils out for now too, just because they'll stick up a ways, and I think it'll be a bit easier to snake the headers in with the coils out. A couple other things I did on the passenger side. I went ahead and pulled loose the let's get some light. I pulled loose the ABS wiring and the vacuum for the IWE wiring out of the way. And actually, you got to pull them loose, because once that header's in there, they need to be a bit rerouted just for more clearance. And then I also pulled off this wire bracket, which kind of tabs in like this to hold all your wires that kind of run up to the PCM. That's going to be kind of in the way too. So all the wires that go to that I pulled off, and I'm going to end up rerouting them just kind of under the fender liner, just to keep it away from the exhaust heat from the turbine housing and that header and the up pipe. One more thing I'm going to do, and I'll show you in a couple steps here, is I got a different PCM bracket, because you can see how far these stick out from the bulkhead, and that just puts it that much closer to the turbine housing. So I've got a little plate to make it more flush mounted into the bulkhead. Also, I did swap out the factory plugs for a colder range plug set. Depending on the mileage you got on your truck at the time you're doing this too, you're probably just going to want to swap them anyways, but I'd recommend swapping them to at least a cold range. One colder range, I got the Ford Performance ones I put in there, kind of what comes with the Whipple kit, but and gap them for whatever boost that you plan to run, because now is a convenient time. But next step, Y-pipe cats, got to yank all that jazz out. The OEM exhaust, if you have that, or your aftermarket exhaust, that's all got to come out of the way. And then we're pulling manifolds, so we'll get to that. All right, factory Y pipe is out. The exhaust I had on there, manifold, I'm just starting on the driver's side because it looked a bit tighter over here. And I like to do the hard stuff first. First thing I noticed before I even got it up is the brake lines were definitely not going to clear where this thing was going to mount. So I did remove a couple holders here. I removed this harness from a mount there. I just removed the mount. And then again on this side, removed the ABS wiring and the IWE vacuum port from this control arm mount here. And then tried to test fit. Actually, I moved it far enough. I'm going to tie these up a bit nicer. I might make a couple brackets for them to still mount off of that control arm bracket there, just so it looks cleaner. And then I'll obviously do some heat shielding because we're going to be tight. I'll move them out a bit more. They do move pretty easy. So differential vent here, that needs to be moved as well. That's just right in line here, not gonna work. So I might just totally pull this out and turn it into a hose, or might just heat shield it and route it elsewhere. I guess I'm a little bit undecided there, but I needed to get the header in there just to see how it was going to fit. But it looks killer, definitely. I mean, it's not like you're really going to even see these, but I mean, you can't deny that it looks good. That's pretty sweet. Getting the factory manifold out wasn't horrible. It helps having powered side ratchets, stuff like that. That was nice. Actually, getting this manifold in, or this header in, might have been a little bit easier even than getting to the manifold bolts or the studs. So one other tight part, you can see this little heat shield right here. It's the heat shield for the differential and the front drive shaft CV joint. Honestly, I don't know how long I'm going to do an underneath the truck exhaust, but for now I am. So I want to keep that heat shield. I'll just have to notch that out so when this engine flexes, you know, a little bit on the mounts, it doesn't rub on that at all. But otherwise, I'm going to get this torque down, move to the other side, get that dry fitted too, and then I'll start clearancing more things, making sure we're going to be free and clear. All right, passenger side here, getting the header on, and it turns out it is a lot tighter fit than I anticipated. So I just wanted to share a little tip. I tried a couple things as far as even getting the factory manifold off, but getting this header kind of squeezed in here. I found it easiest to remove while the factory manifold was on all of the lower studs. After you get all the nuts off, leave one of the uppers on kind of tight. It'll hold the manifold tight to the head. Pull all the lower studs. It is an E8 socket. Anyways, pull all of them lowers. It's just going to be easier that way. You can sneak that manifold out, and then to sneak this header in, even with just the upper studs in, it was kind of tight. So I went ahead and I pulled these rear 2 cylinder studs on the upper as well. So all the lowers out, rear 2 uppers out, and the manifold slid right in, or this header slid right in. Then once it's positioned, you can slide the header back, get these 2 upper studs in here on the rear, and then you can get your gasket on, and then you'll be able to get this header positioned up and get at least, you know, 1 or 2 lower studs started to hold it in place and get the other 2. You can reach the lowers fairly easy underneath. Don't tighten any of the upper nuts until you have all your lower studs started and tight, and then run it down from there. That to me seemed to be the easiest way. I know a lot of guys will jack the engine up. I mean, honestly, it didn't take but a couple minutes to just pop the studs out versus popping the engine mount, jacking it up. This to me just seemed easier. So gonna get her on and torqued up here. Both headers on and torqued. I also got the accessories back on, like AC compressor, alternator. those were nice to have off. Super nice to get to the front studs on both sides really, but majorly the AC compressor, the passenger side. That was almost necessary for sure to leave the compressor off to get to those studs. But they're on. Get everything back together there. I'm leaving the belts off until the turbos are on and I get the drain lines on and tight, because you'll just have a lot better, you know, direct line of attack at the drain bungs there, compared to when the belt's on. It'd be kind of in your way. So everything is on there. Oh, I also got the computer bracket swap, so it sits way more flush into the bulkhead there. Like I said, just to keep it away from the exhaust heat a little more. Obviously there's still going to be some heat there for sure, but it's not going to be quite as close to the piping once it's all in there. Harnesses, again, still have both sides just kind of loose, you know, pop clips popped out and just kind of hanging for now, because same thing here, you know, since I put that PCM bracket in, you lose all of your clips for a lot of these harnesses, which is fine, because I'll be able to get them fixed up looking nice, heat shielded and everything. But just leave them loose for now, because you know, you got to see how the kit exactly is going to line out before you start getting stuff tightened where it's going to set for good. So everything I still got kind of loose until we get the chargers on. So now it is up pipe and turbo time, and then we will clock housings and get probably the oil feed kit hooked up down on the oil filter and start running lines and just get all that stuff set up before we worry about any of the cold side parts. One thing that I do want to note before we start on all the hot side stuff, after I got everything torqued, I was looking at the oil dipstick, kind of wondering what the best way of attack would be there. And honestly, after setting it in there a couple different ways, I was just not a fan of how it was going to have to sit in there. You'd have to bend the tube. It wouldn't be great how tight it sat in between these header pipes. So what the plan there is, which I wasn't expecting, but that's all right, it's not a huge deal, is I'll just do a flexible oil dipstick and mount it, you know, somewhere remote. I don't have one of those kits here right now. You can see I just capped that oil dipstick port for now. At least I can get it running if I got time before that shows up. But I'll mount it up probably on a different valve cover bolt. But yeah, if you're doing this, the factory dipstick, it's just not ideal. The older generations had the dipstick built into the valve cover, so that would be out of the way. But these ones are in the block. It's an external style tube anyways, and yeah, just not ideal for this setup. So we will get a flexible remote mount dipstick tube. Well, full hot side and turbos are in. Let me tell you, I thought it'd be fairly easy getting that hot side ran, and it was fairly easy, but it took forever. It took probably all of 2 hours worth of just adjustments to get it to where the downpipes were not hitting the headers. Trying to, keeping in mind we want to keep the turbos level. Obviously I got the exhaust housings clocked, center plates are clocked straight up and down, kind of, how you need them. So it takes a while just to do those little adjustments, but man, oh man, there's a ton of different pivot points for just initially getting it in, and it took forever to get it to the point where nothing was hitting where it would rattle or rub through. So it looks phenomenal, but it was not fun. It was not fun getting everything to sit where it wouldn't hit. And actually, you know what I ended up having to do, which, I'm not sure what everyone else is doing, but I just didn't see a way where this was going to work. Move this coil here, but these center coils, they were not going to work. They were going to hit this downpipe. So what I did was I just pulled the bolts and clocked them, just turned them so they'd clear. And I'll heat shield that stuff too, but I'll build brackets to just mount those coils to where they're not just gonna, rattle all over, but just to offset them like that, angle them so they're clear of this downpipe. That's just really the only way that I saw it was going to actually work with keeping it still clear of the steering shaft, because that sucker is tight in a couple spots. And actually, off the header here, I think that steering shaft is going to touch. There's a gap right now, but I'm gonna have to figure out what to do to get a little bit more clearance there. Problem is, the header's kind of where it's at. There's really no, nothing you can do about that. So I'm not sure what I'll do. I'm still thinking on that. Otherwise, everything else though, hot side is in. Like I said, it looks ridiculous. It's awesome. It was nice, everything. I was able to keep it fairly level. Each turbo with each other, symmetrical. So it's fairly level, which I was concerned about because I wanted it to look good. But yeah, just took a lot of adjustments. So now it's time for oil. I'm gonna do the drain lines. I'll probably hold off on the feed lines until I have all the the belts on all the accessories, and maybe some of the I almost want to run the cold side system before I run the feed, because I want to see where the lines are going to look the best going up to them. Nonetheless, now's a good time to do the drains. Like I said, you can size them up. I got that fitting there, kind of trying to figure out the best way of going about it to clear everything so it doesn't rub through, but I'm going to get to it. Okay, I ended up deciding to run the oil feed lines. Figured it was a bit easier how I wanted to snake it versus all the cold side on first. So there's the adapter that comes in the kit. I just pointed it and got the feed port pointing between the alternator and that oil cooler hose. And then don't forget your pressure regulator for ball bearing turbos, super important. Just got the line running up that brake line, front of the timing cover, underneath this water crossover, and then up to the fuel rail, and looks good. It's out of the way of everything. Like I said, looks decent, worked out pretty good. It's pretty easy to make these little hoses too, the smaller ones, so easy enough. But that's how I wrote it. Oh, one thing I did want to note too, I forgot to mention when I finished up the hot side with the downpipes. It's kind of obvious, but it's not really mentioned when you buy the kit, but you are going to need upstream oxygen sensor wire harness extensions. So I have extensions. I already ordered them because I assumed I would need them, and you do. So don't forget to order those when you order the kit, or you'll be waiting. All right, on to the next, which is going to be probably the cold side, the charge cooler, and then the cold side piping. I'll probably get routed up. I'll leave the tube going to the manifold until after I get all the coolant hoses back on everything, but I'll probably run cold side first. It'll be easier to snake the coolant hoses around the charge pipes versus trying to snake the charge pipes up into the cooling line mess that they got routed for this engine. So on to the next. Cold side is mounted and hooked up. Actually went pretty good. Charge cooler mounts at the hood latch, and then underneath there's a couple of brackets. I'll put the camera under there in a second. That you just have a couple of rivet nuts you got to drill the holes for and run the rivet nuts in, and then just start hooking up charge pipes, which are pretty straightforward. They actually fit pretty decent. Clears everything pretty good. No complaints really there on the cold side at all. So yeah, looks sweet. I'm gonna run it up in the air and just show you underneath. All right, so underneath, that's kind of how that charge cooler mounts. You can see both the charge pipes coming down underneath the core support and then up to the chargers. But you just get a rivet nut in the core support there, and they just bolt up. Actually, for some reason, the kit only came with 2 bolts. Obviously, you need 4, so good thing I got a bolt in here. But yeah, that went good. Mounts sweet. Like I said, I'm gonna wait on that manifold pipe until I get all the coolant hoses in. One thing I did have to move around was the horns. They did mount up on the top of the core support there, on the upper support. Obviously, that wasn't gonna work with the cooler there. I did still want my horn to work, to be honest, and it was a quick, easy fix. I just took the bracket and I bent it in the vise, and there was an open tab coming off of the radiator, and I just put a self-holding nut and bolted it through that way. Harness still reaches, so hopefully it clears the grill. I guess I'll find that out in a second here, but I did still want them to work, so that was an easy fix for that. Okie dokie, we've got all of the coolant lines hooked back up. Put the coolant reservoir back in here, and everything looks pretty good. She's all free and clear. Everything fit pretty decent. I mean, AC line obviously is kind of bent a little bit to clear the setup. I mean, you'll have to do a little messing around to get everything to fit without touching, so it won't rub any holes or anything, but it all looks pretty good. Yep, charge pipe up to the manifold on, throttle body on, so that all turned out pretty good. Got the blow-off valve mounted down on the charge pipe going up to the manifold. That worked out good. And I put the intake on the driver's side here because next step is to figure out where the catch can is going to mount, because with this kit, really any boosted kit, you're going to need to pull, you know, the PCV system not from the manifold, because that's now going to be charged with pressure. You do not want to add any pressure into the crankcase. So I opted for a Motion Raceworks catch can, and it's going to just be better to mount it on the driver's side. And looking at everything, it looks like it's going to fit the best. The mount between these 2 ground points on the fender bar of the driver's side, I think it'll just work out good there. I am obviously going to be running the filters on the street, driving around and whatnot. If I do any like track events, or if I'm going for times or anything like that, I'll pull them and just run them off the charger. Maybe get some turbo guards for them, probably, just to have for, you know, kind of a fail-safe. But for road driving, I am going to be using the filters. So I just wanted to make sure this catch can will work out well. Another thing that has to be mounted is the vacuum manifold. So somewhere we can pull vacuum and boost from for either a pressure gauge. Boost controller is going to be getting it out of the compressor housing, but for the blow-off valve, that needs vacuum to be able to open. So you can kind of see it down there. I got it mounted. So I want to mount a vacuum manifold. That way, in the future, when I switch to E85 dual regulated system, I can run, you know, the boost regulated gauge, and I'll already have extra ports to tap into for that, or anything. Obviously, even running a Hobbs switch for the fuel system, you know, like a triple pump system. we'll have a vacuum manifold already with open ports that'll take out all of the messing around there. It'll just be ready to rock and roll and hook up easy. So I'll show you how that gets mounted when I mount it. First thing first though is the catch can. We'll get that mounted. I wanted to run it before I figured out what I'm going to do with the heater core lines that mount on these two ports here, just because I'm going to run the hoses underneath where the hoses would have went. It'll just be easier with them out of the way still. So I'll get that routed to show you what it looks like. Alrighty, a lot has changed here, but I kind of had to do a few steps just to make sure everything would fit good together, and I was a little bit short on time, so I didn't time lapse everything, but I do want to run over everything that I did and how I routed it, because it would have saved me a lot of time, you know, if I knew kind of what I had to do to make it work. There's just a lot of would have been nice to knows, so I'll run over those here. First things first, I'll start with the heater core hoses. Those hoses, factory, obviously run on the passenger side valve cover. The heater core, they come down right where all this hot side piping is, and then kind of loop around the front of the timing cover down there. One of them goes to this little bypass valve deal. Is a three-way splitter up to the upper heater core hose. And to be honest with you, I think what a lot of people are doing is I think they're running them tight to this fender bar and just strapping them up. I set it up, I've laid it out like that, wasn't a fan. It just was way too tight to the hot side stuff. And to be brutally honest with you, another reason why I did not want to run them like that is because they sat so tight to this coupler. I mean, you got 3 hoses running over this, and it's already tight in here with the AC lines and the upper radiator hose. Not a fan. So, and if you ever had to pull the charger for some reason, or if you blew that hot side boot there right off the compressor housing, it would have been a total bear to get at. And you would have had to pop the coolant hoses probably off to get to everything, which I just think is a little bit outrageous. So what I did was, and I thought it worked out pretty good. I'm happier with it than routing it on the fender bar, honestly. I took that whole hose section back off, and I kind of went to the drawing table and thought about how I could route it differently. So what I ended up doing was cutting off all of the molded clamps to this little 3-way fitting here, and just kind of laying everything out to see how I could route it different. And what I ended up coming out with is this. Heater core hoses obviously coming up and over the top side of the valve cover here. I got them zipped together kind of just like they are from the factory, really. I shortened, which would be the lower hose going to the passenger side outlet there. I shortened it just a little bit, but otherwise the hose itself was actually bent pretty good. The upper obviously has this 3-way fitting that has the molded clamps, and it comes and crosses over and normally would come like this in front of the housing. So I cut off all those molded clamps and shortened it up, laid it out to where it would sit without rubbing on anything, and I ended up reusing the kind of Y block that they have. It actually works out better than a T would. I do have T's laying around, but the Y actually seemed better. They are barb fittings too, right from the factory. They just use molded clamps. And then I did reuse the angle fitting coming off that valve there and just extended it with a straight adapter, and now that sits pretty good. And yeah, I just like the way it turned out. You could make it look maybe a bit nicer. I have some laying around, but they're kind of spoken for another job already. You could use the heat shrink clamps here, 3/4 inch on this Y block, maybe make it look a little nicer, but everything under here is kind of already the same color, all the clamps I got, so it's not like these really look out of place. But that's what I came out with for the heater core hoses. I will end up heat shielding these above the downpipe, but just to get it laid out, that's what I came up with. And before I did that, because I knew I was going to be in the area, I went ahead and kind of heat taped this engine harness. I do have to move it back. It's, you know, to get it a little bit farther from the turbine housing there. So I'll pull that back, but I wanted to tape it up. I plan on putting some miles on this. It's only got 2,000 miles on it now, but I do plan on putting some miles on the setup, and over time, all that heat being exposed to that harness, it probably would have got brittle, and I just wasn't a fan of it. So same thing over here, shield it off that harness, and there's plenty of others I have to do. I just did the ones that I knew I was going to be working around already. So that's kind of what that looks like. Here's those molded fittings. They sit just, well, you kind of get the point. They sit just like this around that Y block. And all you do is they got these holes here. Just take a pair of snips, snip both edges, and these molded clamps will pop right off. Same thing with that center one that's kind of in the middle of that Y split. Just snip them off and then cut back the hose a little bit on the edge, slit it with a razor blade, and they pop off a whole lot easier because the barbs are actually pretty stout on that fitting there. Next thing would be the catch can. I had the intake up here just to make sure I could angle it to where it would clear, and I got it to where I wanted it. Now, a couple points on this too. It wasn't a perfect kit for this specific truck, or at least how I wanted to route it anyways. It's the Motion Raceworks Gen 3 Coyote stock valve cover design. That's the kit I ordered, and it comes with 6 foot of the hose, and then it comes with some Frigola fittings for the AN. But a couple things I would change if it were me. I would, well, I got to add some hose. I ran out of hose. I ended up having some other AN10 line laying around that is pretty similar, but I'm going to end up just ordering more of the same stuff. That way it's perfectly matching. But just to get it laid out to see how it was going to work, I ended up using a section that I already had here. If it were me, instead of the straight fittings coming off of this catch can, and I'm going to order some because I'm not a huge fan of the way it kind of comes out like that, put some 45-degree fittings on here, and that's probably all I'd change for fittings. And one thing that would have been, you know, one of those nice to knows kind of deal, and I found out after I did a little bit of digging, but it spent some time trying to figure it out. The PCV valve in the passenger side valve cover has, they don't look like the previous generation. This is a 24 truck. So 24 trucks had a cap that is press fitted and kind of molded to the valve cover that sits over it. So when you're looking at it on the truck, it looks like this. Obviously you can't spin that off and pull it out with that cap on there. It looks like it's part of the valve cover when you're looking at it, but it's not. It is separate. It's molded a little bit. But what I did anyways to get that off so I could put the fitting in for Motion Raceworks, I just used a pencil, high-speed pencil bit that I have, a burr bit, and just cut a little slot in there and then popped it up with a pry bar, a small pry bar, and it popped right off. Then you get access to back this out and put the AN adapter fitting on there from Motion Raceworks. So that would have been nice to know, because at first I was a little stumped, like, oh, what's going on here? I didn't think it was removable, but it is. That's how you do that. And then the adapter fitting on the vent side, the clean side, is pretty straightforward. But that's what I would have changed on this kit, and what I am going to change. I'll put some 45 fittings on there and get some matching holes. That way that lines out. But I ended up routing them underneath the cold side charge pipe on this, and then this side I just came underneath on the front side of the valve cover and tied them up to the oil drain for this charger. They kind of look like they flow pretty good together. It was just the best way. Honestly, after I was looking at it, this 90-degree fitting that's coming off of the valve cover for the PCV side, I wouldn't have mind seeing, you know, I don't know if they make like 120-degree fitting or something to just get it a little tighter so you don't have this big hump here. But it doesn't look horrible just because it does still sit lower than the rest of everything else. So, I mean, if you want to get picky, or if you want to get, if you're ordering fittings anyways, you could order a tighter angle and it wouldn't come up so far like that. So that's what I would change there. I did get the vacuum block installed, and I ended up putting it right on the bracket coming off the fender bar on the driver's side where the airbox used to sit. This vacuum manifold did come from, or did come with the daylight kit, and it came with all the plugs, and it came with some standard vacuum fittings. I went ahead, we do a lot of like air systems here at the shop, so I have a lot of these fittings laying around, 1/8 inch NPT that threads into here to 1/4 inch airline, like a quick, you know, push lock style fitting. I wanted to run that, and that's what I'll end up running for the gates and the boost controller too, but that's what I ran right now for the blow-off valve, because right now the only thing I'm using this block for is the blow-off valve. Like I said, once I do a return style fuel system, that's going to change. I'll need a port for the low pressure regulator because that will be boost referenced. High pressures aren't, but you know, it's nice to have extra ports here open for anything that you might add to the system. But again, those I ran down. Now, where I pulled vacuum from, which actually worked out, I think, pretty good. I was happy with it. So obviously you're not using the port coming off the intake manifold for the PCV side anymore because of your catch can setup. So there's an open port, a big port, on the front of this intake manifold here. So instead of like drilling somewhere and threading in a fitting, which I'd rather not do if I don't have to, I took one of the 90-degree fittings from the PCV hose. Here's one of the hoses anyways, and what you do is you can just use a razor blade, cut a little slit in it, and it'll pop right off. And again, it's a barb fitting, and this is a 1/2 inch size fitting, or I at least use 1/2 inch holes that work good. And so I used that quick connect fitting, put a 1/2 inch holes on there, reduced it down to 3/8. Again, kind of routed that over and under, and came up and used my 3/8 hose for my 3/8 barb on this vacuum manifold. I thought that worked out pretty good. Honestly, like I said, it's better than trying to thread a fitting in somewhere to that manifold, or having to drill and thread a fitting into a plastic manifold, or, you know, I'm sure they make different adapters to come off and tee off of maybe the evap hose. You could probably do or any of the above, but I already had an open port. I would have had to cap it anyways. I might as well use it, and it's a pretty big port, so it should supply plenty of, or quick enough, you know, vacuum and pressure to that manifold for anything that I'm gonna have to use off of it. So all in all, that took a lot longer than I wanted it to, kind of like most things on this setup, but obviously, if, you know, you're putting this much time and effort into something, you're not going to, you know, just do it cheaply. You're gonna try to do it nice. And like I said, that being that this truck is going to be kind of not a daily driver, but it's gonna get drove a lot, and I don't want to lose features of things. I want it to be just like, almost like the truck came this way, you know, just run it. There's not a whole lot of things you got to worry about. That's kind of the goal. So that's why I routed things the way I do. But keep in mind, this is all kind of in a way, figured out yourself. You can route things however you want. I just routed things this way. And like I said, hopefully this saves you a little bit of time just seeing how I laid it out. Maybe that's how you want to route things, maybe not. But like I said, that doesn't really matter. You can route things whatever way you'd like to on this kit. So next thing to do, or really there's only a couple things left, and that's going to be doing the battery relocate, which I have some cool ideas for that, because the kit does come with the NOCO battery box, and then it comes with cables, but that is pretty much it. They don't give you any sort of post adapter or anything like that for these cables. Being this is running a stock computer, and I'm going to keep it on a stock computer system, I still want to use the current sensor for this, so it's not like you could just pull the eyelet off and put it on a lug somewhere. I just really don't want to do that. I do want to actually retain the use of these factory style terminal or posts for the battery. So I'll show you what I'm going to do there once I get it routed. And then the next thing would just be start tying stuff up in heat shielding. Like I said, we got to kind of figure out what we're going to do with this mess. Majority of it's just going to be tucked up under the wheel liner here, zipped up. There's a couple things to zip up to, you know, but I still got to figure out where I'm going to mount this cluster for the ABS and the IWE. I have an idea for that as well. So once I get it on, if it looks decent, I'll show you guys how I routed that stuff too. Now, I do believe I am going to have to cut the wheel liners too a little bit to clearance from the headers and the downpipes on both sides, I think. But before I even put those liners in, I'll show you guys what I did with these wiring and how I ran the battery relocate, and then I'll end up showing you what I gotta do to make the wheel liners fit back in good. So, on to the next. One quick note. I was just talking about the catch can setup and needing more holes to fit where I mounted the catch can, and then wanting to run 45-degree fittings coming off that can. So I just want to give you an idea. If you were going to run this, the Gen 3 stock valve cover catch can, then this is what you'll need. So this is the hose that they're using in the kit. The premium nylon race hose, number 10 AN. They give you 6 feet. Like I said, that wasn't enough. I probably could have used a 10-foot chunk, honestly, so maybe order another 6-foot chunk of that just to have some extra laying around. But that's the hose you'll need if you want to run this kit. You'll need some more if you want to mount it where I did. And then same thing, this is the style hoses or style fittings they're using with that hose. So you can go into Fragola and order 245-degree fittings to come off of that catch can. They're just the Pro Flow hose ends. And number 10, obviously this is one of the bags from the 90-degree fittings, but just order some 245s to come off the catch cam. It'll just look a lot nicer. So that's what you'll need there. Battery relocation is complete. I will show you guys how I ran things. I think it turned out pretty sweet, but you can always run things however you want to. As far as what they send for the battery relocation as part of this turbo kit, isn't really a whole lot, I guess. I mean, it's most of it. It's the box and the wiring, pretty much is what you get. But they don't have really any way to adapt them to the factory post clamps or any of that. So this is what I ended up putting together. We've got kind of a terminal, like a universal terminal post here. The lines the cable they send on the bottom, tightened down with a lock washer, and then I put a lead post threaded onto that with the factory battery clamp. Works out pretty slick. That way the current sensor still works. The positive is just like it would hook up to your battery, and it looks pretty clean. Obviously I still get a heat shield, all this stuff, but as far as getting it hooked up, I actually did already hook the battery up completely. But yeah, I think that worked out pretty slick. Cables just ran through, kind of tucked them up high, got them run under behind the factory heat shielding there. Up underneath, we've got them just held to the frame channel there. And then up into the bed, we've got the Noco box that they send. Hop up in here, give you guys a closer look. Wow. Noco box, which is a nice box, not gonna lie. And then I got these weather tight seals that I drilled through the bed. That way it runs down tight on the cables, so the cables aren't sitting there pulling on the box, and then also they're watertight, so it'll still be sealed. Not like I really need the bed sealed because it leaks up front anyways, but I just like the way they look. Like watertight bulkhead seal there. It worked out great on these cables. So yeah, turned out pretty nice, you know, sleek. I like it mounted that way in the bed. That way most of it's still usable. It's not in the center or really, you know, anywhere that's going to be annoying, I think. But yeah, so that's how I ran things. Like I said, you can pretty much run it how you want to. If you had like a toolbox in the bed, you know, I don't know why you would, but someone mentioned that'd be kind of a cool spot to put it. It'd look pretty sleek and hidden there. So yeah, turned out good. Truck is connected to power, so it is good to test fire. And I think before I get too fancy with heat shielding and tying up cables, I am going to test fire it before I put coolant in as well, just to make sure our oil line's all sealed up good. We don't have any sort of leaks anywhere. I am going to prime the system with the clear flood mode just to get oil pressure to the turbos before we go ahead and fire them. I did put some oil in the feed lines before I installed the feed lines, but you know, it's still smart to make sure you see oil pressure before you fire it. So we're gonna get a test run in here. Alrighty, test start time. Going to do clear flood mode till I see oil pressure. Do one more clear flood mode cycle, come out, check for oil leaks, make sure nothing's leaking, and then do our test fire.
Camera went off.
Did? Just want to click it. Oh, did the screen go off or is it?
Screen went off.
Oh, that's all right.
Oh yeah.
Okay, took a few cycles because obviously I changed the oil at the same time when I popped the filter off to do the feedline adapters. So I changed the oil, AMSOIL 550, new oil filter, so it took a while to get it primed up. But just gonna check for leaks here quick at the chargers. Timing cover. I think we're good. I think it's first start time. The exhaust housings, or the turbine housings, and then just some oil residue that's on the pipes. Well, I don't have coolant in it because I wanted to make sure we weren't leaking oil and I had to drain it all again, but we're not leaking oil, so that was a good first start. Perfect. Well, test start went pretty great. Didn't have any leaks. Sounded sweet. I just obviously have the downpipes dumped right now. I got to build an exhaust for it. That's just going to be for a different day. But yeah, no, it sounded awesome. Sweet for sure. Now I just want to, or actually I'm just getting stuff heat shielded, tied up. I've got the harness for the ABS and the IWE bolted. I just bolted with a stainless bolt, stainless clamp to the strut tower just to get clearance there so I can get the wheel liner back in. Obviously the wheel liner will probably have to be trimmed a bit. We don't want it sitting any bit close to the headers or the downpipe, but yeah, looks phenomenal through the wheel well. And then this side, there's obviously a lot more jazz going on with the brake lines and whatnot. So I've got those all heat taped up, or not heat taped, but heat wrapped. And same thing over here on the strut tower, this harness here. These will just go back onto, I got them just tucked up right now out of the way so I can see what I'm doing. But those will just get little self-clip back onto the wheel liner as well. So otherwise though, yeah, looks sweet. Looks sweet, and she's ready for wheel liners. Well, there you guys have it. Finished product. I am absolutely stoked with how it turned out. Just looks sweet. I'm pretty pumped with this kit. I did some research obviously before I ordered it. I know these guys are having great luck with them. So I'm just pumped with how it turned out. It took a while for install, longer than I was expecting personally. But you know, at the end of the day, it's a sweet kit. You know, there's some extras you got to order with it. That's just kind of expected with any kit like this, honestly. You know, there's going to be little things that are, you know, your setup specific that you're going to have to order, things like that, how you want things routed, all of the above. There's always going to be a little extra stuff here and there, but got the tires back on. Wheel liners had to be trimmed just in the rear corners on both sides where those headers sit, just to get enough clearance to where they're not touching anything. Also where I rerouted the brake lines over here, and it really was easy to trim out. I just used the scissors, it cut right through it just fine. So that was an easy way of making that look decent. But yeah, here's the finished product, and it's sweet. It's awesome. I can't wait. I'm waiting on my RTD device. So you see I didn't pull the intake or the fuel rails or anything like that. I wanted to still be able to start it to get a heat cycle through it. I actually did last night run a heat cycle through it just to make sure, you know, everything got up to temp. I wasn't going to have any water leaks or anything. That was all good, but I am waiting on my RTD device. So if you guys are curious on my setup, what I'm going to do or what I'm going to run it on, right now, at least probably for the remainder of this year, because we're getting kind of later in the year, and I just want to be able to drive it, honestly. I want to be able to run it a little bit and just see how it does. So I'm keeping it on pump fuel right now, but I am going to run that GT500 style injectors from Ford Performance, basically, which comes in the Whipple kit, and then also the EcoBoost map sensor, which also comes in the Whipple kits. So it'll be kind of like a stage 2 Whipple fuel system. And that should give me enough power to play around with and be happy with for this year. Eventually, I am going to put it on E85, like I was telling you, with the dual regulated setup, triple pump setup. But for now, I'm just going to run it like this. It's going to be way better than it was before, and I'm pumped. And actually, I'm kind of curious to see how far we can take it safely on just pump fuel. We don't have great 91, it's 91 ethanol-free fuel here, so you can't go, you know, a whole long ways with that. Maybe a little octane booster just to see what we can get out of it. And like I said, just run it like that for now. But that's going to be my setup. The boost controller I'm going to be using is the eBoost 2 controller from TurboSmart. Figured might as well. It's an easy enough setup to use, fairly friendly. As far as how I'm going to mount that, I am going to mount that into, I got this little gauge pod holder here from the same company that made the PCM bracket. So this will sit in the driver's side far left vent while you're sitting in the cab. So we just to the left-hand side of the steering wheel. I really wanted to mount it on the A-pillar, kind of like the Banks setups are, but the smallest I could find one of those pods, or the biggest you can get that pod holder is a 52 mil, and the smallest eBoost 2 I could get was a 60 mil. So it just wasn't gonna work. Maybe I could have made it work, but I will be plenty happy with it in the dash like that. I figured I wouldn't show you how I ran that, because it's honestly, even like how you plumb in the gates is going to be totally different for, I shouldn't say everybody, but there's a number of ways to run the lines for a boost controller depending on what kind of controller it is, spring pressures, boost goals. You know, there's just a bunch of different ways you can plumb them. So I recommend just doing your own research on that, because my setup's most likely not going to be the same as yours as far as how you plumb all that in. So that's why I still have these intakes. I didn't put the clamps on them. I just got them sitting there for a visual, because I got to pop them off and run my gate lines. But, you know, I'm still waiting on my RTD. I think it'll be a couple weeks before I see that. So that's that. But hopefully this video helps you guys out. For install. I know it would have helped me a ton just with how to route certain things, you know, because honestly, that's what took half the time, is to figure out what sits best where, or at least in my opinion, for my setup, what sat best where. And just getting an idea before you jump into something is nice to have too. Like I said, I didn't really find much for information out there as far as the install is concerned. There's a couple videos, but they're not, you know, really great full videos, and I do apologize for not time-lapsing kind of the last half of the nitty-gritty stuff. I just was running short on time and had to get this off my rack so I can get back to my normal day-to-day jobs. But yeah, I'm pumped with the truck. Like I said, hopefully it helps you. There is a couple things I forgot to mention that I do just want to point out, and this might also help you too. I did forget to mention there was a shroud underneath the radiator and condenser that kind of stuck out and hooked up to the grill shutter box that's behind the grill. That has to be removed to fit the charge cooler. I do think I forgot to mention that. How you get that off, it is push pinned in from the bottom of the radiator. So you can't really, you know, pull those push pins without pulling the radiator, and that's just pointless, obviously. So if you pull that flap downwards, get a razor blade in there, and you can just snip all of them. I think there's 4 of them. You can just snip them all and it'll pull right out. So that was easy enough. I think I forgot to mention that. A couple other things that might help you guys out is gaskets that I used. Because I had a hard time for some reason with Ford diagrams as far as especially the valve cover, the valve covers and the timing covers. The gaskets are different between obviously the Pro Power on board trucks. They have a different valve cover design. So figuring out which gaskets were for which, I ended up ordering both. So I want to show you the part numbers that I used. Might help you. I don't know. I don't even think this kit would probably fit with a Pro Power on board truck. I'm pretty confident it would not. But, you know, if you don't have a Pro Power on board truck, obviously, here's your exhaust gasket part numbers. And this is a 24-25. I don't think a whole lot changed between for 21 up, but this is for sure, you know, a 24-25 setup. So those are exhaust gaskets. Here's valve cover gasket right there. Here's a valve cover gasket right here. And then we got timing cover right here, right here, and then also another timing cover right here. You got 3 of them, the one in the center and then the 2 off to the sides. And then here is the water outlet seal for the thermostat housing. That is right there. And then here is the water pump gasket right here. The only gasket I never ended up getting, which I guess it spaced me. Now this engine was new enough. Technically all these gaskets are like a reusable style. In my opinion, if you're digging that deep into your engine, well, it's a couple bucks in gaskets to not worry about it. That's the way I look at things. But, you know, you could theoretically reuse all of them if you get a low mileage engine like this. But the only gasket that I didn't get, and I should have, but I didn't, and I'll know for next time, is the high pressure fuel pump, the kind of squarish looking gasket that seals the valve cover around where that high pressure pump mounts. That's the only one I didn't get. So those part numbers I cannot include for you because I do not have them. But otherwise, there's your gaskets. That might help you, save you some time for at least the timing cover, valve cover gaskets. But yeah, all in all, let me know your opinions on what you think of the setup, how I did installing it. If you got, you know, questions, comments, have at them. Questions too, I mean, I get pretty busy during the week on jobs, but when I get time, you know, if you get little questions on installs, I mean, feel free to just, I guess, reach out. I don't have a problem at all. That was my purpose with this video, is to help people out. And I'm glad I took the time to do it because, like I said, I think this would really probably save somebody some time. So, like I said, you got questions, have at them. I'll try to get to you. I can't say I'll get to you right away just because I am busy, but I will get to you when I can. And yeah, that's pretty much a wrap. Oh, hold on. I did forget one super important final thing. All right, let's see here. Just gotta scrub that. Oh, yep. Yep, finishing touches. That's right. That's gonna probably hurt some feelings. I know it's gonna hurt mine when I get spanked by an LS, but hey, someone had to do it, you know? So, yeah. Thanks again for watching. I'm super pumped. Keep an eye out for more content on the truck itself. And maybe if I do some more cool projects here, which I do currently have some rolling, I'll try to video what I can. I get super busy. It's easier to video my own stuff when I make time for it, but I'll try to do what I can for more videos. And like I said, I definitely plan on putting more content out on this truck as I build with it and, you know, start to push the gray area of this long block. We'll see. It's hard to say what'll go first, but something's gonna go eventually. So I'll keep you in touch with that. But alrighty, that's gonna be a wrap for this one.